Okay, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Okay, we are going to talk about a very interesting passage at the end of this week's Parsha. It is a loaded Parsha with a whole lot of different things going on, but at the end of the Parsha, there is a story which I think we're all familiar with, but what we're going to do is we're going to read it inside, because when you read it inside, like we've been doing so often, you sometimes walk away with a very different story, okay? So what's the story I'm referring to? It's the story about Miriam and Aaron talking about Moshe. Miriam and Aaron talking about Moshe. Is anyone familiar with the story? And anyone want to share with us? Miriam, Aaron talking about Moshe?
Yeah. Miriam's the sister.
Miriam's the sister, Aaron's the brother. Correct. And there is a passage, a well-known story of them talking gossip of some sort, lashon hara, about him, right? Okay, so I'm setting you up for failure, because whatever you're gonna say, you know I'm gonna tell you there's more to it. But what's the narrative that we're somewhat familiar with? Anybody? Go ahead, Seth.
They, for whatever reason, they complain about the Cushite woman that he's married. So they don't refer to her as Zipporah, which we know from earlier, and seem to indicate that they, the brother and the sister, can share some of Moshe's duties.
Okay, interesting. So that's already some interesting interpretation. Good. So they are complaining about the wife of Moshe, okay? They don't call her by name. Her name, we know, is Zipporah. They don't call her by name. They refer to her as a Cushite, okay? We'll talk about what a Cushite is. The term Cush, sorry? Black typically means black. That's right. And typically people want to refer to someone who is black. The typical term that was used, now we'll talk about political correctness, but the typical term that's used in general to refer to someone of color is a Cushi. A Cushi in modern Hebrew, again, it's probably not so politically correct anymore to do that, but that was a term that was used from the word Cushite. Now, where does Zipporah come from? Which country does she come from? Midian. Are Midianites Cushites? Are they black? No, they are part of the Middle East. They are darker than me, which is not saying much, but they are not black, right? So this passage is a little bit strange. The simplest, the most well-known, the way I was taught this passage in school was that they were actually talking, not so much they wanted to share in the glory of Moshe, they had a criticism about him not taking care of his wife, that Moshe was not caring for his wife. Okay, we have some traditions about him separating from his wife, and that was their criticism. How they know this, is a discussion unto its own. There are source sheets over there if you'd like, but that is the background. Let's read through the psukim together. There's 10 verses over here, 10 psukim, and let's see what they have to say. So, V'tidaber Miriam v'Aaron b'Moshe. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe, al odos Isha Cushis asher lakach, because of the Cushite woman he had taken. Ki Isha Cushis lakach, because he took a Cushite woman. Now those words are a little bit, almost circular. They spoke about the Cushite woman because he took a Cushite woman. It's like, what is that explaining? So it doesn't really seem to help us understand what it is that they're saying negatively. It just says, because he took a Cushite woman. So what? What about that is problematic? The text doesn't explain to us. Okay, let's keep on reading. Vayomru, and they said, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem. Had Hashem only spoken through Moshe? Halo gambanu diber, has God not spoken through us as well? Vayishma Hashem, and Hashem heard him. Okay? So basically, there is this criticism that they're saying that Hashem did not only speak to Moshe, God spoke to us as well. That seems to be the criticism. Again, what's the problem? Like, what are they saying? It's very ambiguous over here, right? Again, what they say is they're speaking about his wife, and then that has something to do with the fact that didn't God speak to all of us? What's going on, right? If we were to stop over here, it'd be hard to understand what their issue is. Vayishma Hashem, and Hashem heard. Again, from these two verses, do you understand what's going on? It's a little hard, yeah.
I have a question. Wasn't Moses married when he left the palace and he had children? So what happened to that situation?
So the Torah tells us that she was with them. They came back to the desert. They separated when he went back to Egypt, and then Zipporah comes back to the desert.
The same Zipporah.
We don't know. Let's read the text, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. The text calls her Cushite. It doesn't call her Zipporah. If we're going to assume, like Seth appropriately assumed, that we're talking about Zipporah, what's going on over here? Again, I'm just reading words, but I'm trying to understand them. All we're saying so far is that they speak negatively about Moshe because he took a Cushite woman. Okay, and then their concern is, didn't God speak to all of us? How do these 2 points connect? What exactly are they saying? It's not so clear. God hears, okay? And then the third verse, it gets even stranger. And now it starts telling us about the character of Moshe. Vaha'ish Moshe anav me'od. And Moshe was a very humble person. What's this doing here? What in the world is this doing here? Again, these three verses are so hard to read. Mikol adam asher al pnei ha'adama, more than any person in the world. Again, so verse number 1, they criticize him, something to do with this wife he has, and she's described as a Cushite. What's the criticism, and why is she described as a Cushite? Questions number 1 and 2. Number 3, what exactly is their complaint that God spoke to all of us, not just to Moshe? What is that complaint? And number 4, why do we need to know about his humility here? What's going on? Yeah.
To set the stage for the next verse, which says why Hashem intervened in this family matter directly.
What do you mean?
Well, Moses was so humble, he was not going to speak up against his older brother.
Okay, so there's let's come back to that. Let's come back to that answer. No, I like that. Let's come back to that. Okay, now let's see how God responds. Vayomer Hashem, we're at verse number 4. Vayomer Hashem, and God says, Pisom, suddenly, El Moshe vel Aaron vel Miriam. Suddenly God speaks to Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. T'u shlashtechem. Go out, the three of you go out from your tents, El Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting, the Mishkan, right, the tabernacle. Vayetzu shlashtem, and the three of them go out. Vayered Hashem ba'amud anan, and Hashem came down in a pillar of cloud. Vayamod pesach ha'ohel, and they stopped at the entrance of the tent. Vayikra Aaron and Miriam, vayetzu shneim, and God calls out to Aaron and Miriam, and the two of them come forward. Okay, so God now wants to communicate to Aaron and Miriam. Okay, what does God say? Vayomer, and God says, Shimuna devarai, listen to my words. Im yeh niviyachem Hashem, when you are going to have prophets of God, b'mare elav esvada, through a vision, I will appear to them. B'chalom adaber bo, I will speak to a prophet in a dream or in a vision. Okay, lo chen avdi Moshe, verse number 7. Not so my servant Moshe. B'chol beisi nemanhu, in all of my household he is trusted. Moshe is trusted in my entire household. He is someone who is different than all other prophets. How so? Verse number 8. Peh el peh adaber bo. When I speak to him, it is mouth to mouth or face to face. Umare velo bechidos. There is a vision, but it's not through a riddle. Okay, Utmunas Hashem yabit. He sees a likeness of God. Okay, umadua, and why lo yerasim ledaber ba'avdi b'Moshe? Why were you not concerned? Why are you not scared about speaking against my servants, against Moshe? Okay, so still the puzzle just continues, but now God intervenes and says, guys, don't you know how great Moshe is? Moshe is qualitatively different than every other prophet. Other prophets experience prophecy in a dream. They experience prophecy in riddles. They experience prophecy in some form of a not distorted, but not perfectly clear vision. Moshe is different. Moshe speaks like you and I are speaking right now. Moshe speaks awake. Moshe speaks person to person. Moshe speaks, and we speak without any riddles. There is clarity and complete lucidity when I speak to Moshe. Okay? Very important information, but again, what does that have to do with the narrative? What is happening over here? Let's keep on reading. Verse number 9. Vayichar af Hashem bam vayilach. And Hashem was mad at them, and he departed. Okay, Va'anan, verse number 10, Va'anan sar me'al ha'oel, and then the cloud withdraws from the tent. V'nei Miriam mitzoras kashaleg, and Miriam was stricken with tzoras in the color of snow. Tzoras is a form of spiritual leprosy, and this is where our tradition comes from, that a person is afflicted with tzoras for what? For gossip. When we gossip, again, in temple times, there was a supernatural form of leprosy where it was in response to a person's sins that a person received leprosy. Okay, Vayifen Aaron el Miriam v'hinei mitzoras, and Aaron turned to Miriam, and behold, Miriam, who instigated this whole conversation, she was full of leprosy. End of narrative. Okay, the end of narrative actually has Moshe davening, praying that Miriam should be healed, and she is healed. Okay. Very strange set of psukim. Again, let's review what happens over here, and let's review the challenges. There is something negative said about Moshe in the context of his wife. She is referred to as we don't know what he said. We don't know what Miriam and Aaron said. We have no idea. Okay? B, why is she not referred to by her regular name as Tzipora? Why is she referred to as a Cushite? Number 3, why do we need to know about the humility of Moshe over here? Number 4, How is this response about Moshe's great prophecy? How is that a response? Those are some of the questions we're going to try to address. Our main focus is going to try to understand who this woman is and what they're saying, what the negativity is, what is their slander, and that's going to be our main focus. Okay, so we have a couple of sources in front of you. I do apologize, I did not have time to translate them, but I will read them as slowly as I can, and I'll translate them verbally. So first source is the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra is one of the great medieval philosophers and commentators. He writes as follows. Who is this? He goes through, in his commentary, he goes through a number of different options, and then he lands in the following. Okay, the first source, Ibn Ezra. Vayashar be'enai, the approach that seems most true to me, shazu hakushis hi tzipora. That this Cushite woman is a reference to Tzipora. Why? Ki Midyanit, because she is from Midian. Umidyanim heim Yishmaelim, and Midian is from the tribe of Yishmael. Okay, Midian is a descendant of the Ishmaelites. We'll call them Arabs. Ve'imdarim ba'ahalim, and many of the Arabs in the even not so ancient worlds were tent dwellers. They lived partially outdoors. They were nomadic. They didn't have homes as we had homes. Most of their livelihood was traveling, was taking care of sheep, was in the outdoors. Okay, v'chein kasuv yirgazun yirios eretz Midian. Okay, quotes a verse which speaks about their tent dwelling. Uva'avur chom hashemesh, and because of the heat of the sun, ein lahem lavan klal, they don't have so much white skin. Okay, utzipora haisa shchora, and therefore Tzipora was dark, v'dome lekushis, and therefore was like a Cushite woman. Okay, so the Ibn Ezra comes along and says, we don't know of another wife that he marries, and therefore, if they're talking about his wife, it must be Tzipora. Now, why is she called a Midianite? He says the best I could come up with is that, of course, why is she called a Cushite? Even though she's not from Cush, which classically is explained to mean, the place of Cush is typically translated as Ethiopia, a place where they have really dark skin. Okay, so even though they are, she's not a full-fledged Cushite, but that becomes a term that people refer to people of dark skin. Midianites presumably had very dark skin, and therefore it's a reference to her. Now, the Ibn Ezra over here does not explain what their criticism was. So only have one clue of this whole story, but he begins, which is the assumption that most take, that the woman they're referring to is Tzipora, and that answers only one question. We still need to figure out, what is their criticism? Why are they criticizing her? That's the one thing we have to figure out, okay? But let's hold on to that approach, and now we're going to share a wild approach. Something the Rashbam says. Who is the Rashbam? The Rashbam is a grandson of Rashi. Okay, Rashi, the great commentator, the great French commentator, he has 4 daughters, and they have a number of sons. We don't know too much about their daughters, although we do have traditions that some of them wore tefillin, that they were some of the writers in his commentary. It's a long time ago. We don't know. There's some fiction literature that has been written about the daughters. We don't really know too much about them, but they were clearly very impressive people. Their sons are probably the most influential Ashkenazic thinkers. They are the ones who write a commentary on the Talmud known as Tosfos, and Rabbeinu Tam is like the main leader. Very, 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 in some ways, even more impactful than their famous grandfather Rashi. And one of the grandsons is this man by the name of the Rashbam. It's an acronym, okay? And he writes a commentary on the Torah, which doesn't incorporate the classical rabbinic sources. What he does is he sticks to the simple meaning of the text, okay? So let's see what the Rashbam says. HaKushit. What is Kushit? Shehi mimishpachas Cham. This is a full-fledged Cushite. He says it's not a reference to Tzipora. He says read the Torah for what it says. The Torah says that she is from Cush, so she's from Cush, which is from the family of Cham. Now, what do we know about the family of Cham? The family of Cham has descendants. Some of those more famous descendants are the Canaanites, right? What do we know about the Canaanites and marriage with the Canaanites? What does Avram say? What does Yitzchak say?
Canaanites?
The Canaanites, yes. Don't marry them. Don't marry them, right? There is one message, right? Avram tells his servant, leave Canaan. I don't want my son Yitzchak to marry someone from Canaan. And what does Yitzchak tell his son when and Yitzchak sends Yaakov away, and one of the reasons he sends him away is because he doesn't want him marrying someone from Canaan, right?
Well, idol worshipers.
Right, so I think we had a class way back when as to what the issue was. That's one explanation. There are different explanations. Some of it might have to do with geography, but yes, one of the explanations is that they are idolaters and there are issues. And bottom line is the tradition of the Jewish people has been not to marry from Canaan. Let's keep that in mind, okay? Says the Rashbam further, Ki Isha Cushis lakach, because he took a wife from Cush. Ki dichsiv b'divrei hayamim, as it is written in the book of Chronicles. Now, the book of Chronicles is the final book in Tanakh, Divrei Hayamim. That's not what he's referring to over here. What he is referring to is a quasi-midrashic literature. There is a book that was written called Divrei Hayamim Shel Moshe Rabbeinu, which means the Chronicles, the story of Moses. Okay, there was this book that was written detailing all the fun details that the Torah omits. The Torah, as we know, is a really lousy history book. If you're learning the Torah for history, you're barking up the wrong tree. The Torah is a book of education. It is not a book of history, okay? And there's always details missing. You can't put it all together from the Torah alone. And so sometimes our sages fill in some of the blanks, some of the missing pieces. And sometimes you have this literature which kind of evolves. And there's this book written called Divrei Hayamim Shel Moshe. And one of the things it focuses on is the 60-year gap, 60-plus year gap. What's 60-plus year gap? Moshe leaves Egypt as a young man, 18, maybe 20, maybe even younger. The next time we hear from him, how old is he? 80 years old. There's 60 years missing the Torah is completely silent about. What happened during those years? And this book writes, okay, the tradition that they had was that Moshe, one of the things that happened, okay, it's a whole long, fascinating book, but one of the things that happens is he comes to the city, and there is a siege in the city, and he saves the city, and from their siege, and he becomes the king of the city, this country, not just a city, a major country, he becomes a king, and in the process of this time of him becoming a king, what happens? He is there for 40 years, and he marries a woman from that place. Because everyone who is a student of history knows, you can't be an outsider and expect to rule over a geographic location, right? All the great marriages, not the modern generation, but historically, all the great marriages between the great kingdoms in Europe, they were marriages of love and romance. They were marriages of, they were marriages that were trying to, politics. They were by marrying, Catherine the Great. You have to marry the right person, and that gives you more of a dominion over this place. You have to marry the right people so that you have authority. And that's exactly what's going on over here. Moshe is in the land of Cush, and in order to consolidate his reign over the throne, he has to marry someone from Cush. Okay? That's what he says. So he says, "De Moshe Rabbeinu melech haya be'eretz Cush," the first line over there. Moshe was a king in the land of Cush, Arbaim Shana, for 40 years. V'lakach malka achas, and he took a queen, and here's the key words, v'lo shachav ima, and he was never intimate with her. In other words, it was purely done for political reasons. She was the queen sitting next to him, but he never married her. Okay? He never consummated his marriage. He was never intimate with her. Okay? Vehem lo yadu, and they, his siblings, how do they know that? They see he has a wife. They see this wife who's coming along all the time. By the way, this is crazy. You never thought this. You always assume he has one wife, Tzipora. But the Rashbam is saying, no, there's this other woman who's schlepping along all throughout. She is a queen from Cush who is with him throughout his entire journey, right? And as far as everyone's concerned, he's fully married to her. They didn't know. Kishadibru bo shelo nizkakla. Okay, and they did not know that he was never with her. Ze ikar pshuto. This is the simple explanation. Okay? Now, what is the... No, 1 second. Okay, so that is the explanation of the Rashbam, that who we're referring to is a woman that Moshe was with, as Moshe was married to. What's their criticism? Now we can understand a little better. What's their criticism of Moshe? No, they don't know that. The criticism is that he's married to someone from Cush, meaning this understanding is that since it's a descendant of Ham is the part of that family of the Canaanites, and we know Avram and Yitzchak, they don't have mitzvos before the giving of the Torah, but they have a few traditions. One of them is, don't marry from this family. So now we understand their criticism is, you married someone from that family. What are you doing? Now what they did not know is that Moshe was never intimate. That's the dialogue. That's the bit of the back and forth over here. You with me? In other words, so we're introduced to a new wife. According to this version, according to this approach, Moshe has not only one wife, Tzipora, but he has two wives. But this wife is not a wife he is ever intimate with. Their criticism is that he married this woman. And that's what it means. Ki Isha Cushis lakach. Their criticism is that he took a Cushite's wife. Yes?
But the word lokach, isn't it usually in the context of kedushin?
Good, great question. So a very halachic question. The word lekicha, vayikach, is a term that the Gemara uses to demonstrate that there's a full-fledged marriage. It is worth noting that you could be fully married without intimacy. In other words, it's meaning there could be kiddushin, there could be halachic marriage without intimacy. Our modern marriages are not defined by intimacy. Typically, it's the kiddush. There's other pieces of the marriage which at the end of the marriage ceremony after yichud, they're fully married, even without them being intimate. They are halachically 100% married. So it could be that there was full-fledged marriage, but again, he was never intimate with her. Now, what I don't understand according to this approach is the continuation. Why do we need to highlight the humility of Moshe? Okay, we'll come back to a possible answer for that, right? Why is the humility of Moshe necessary over here, right?
Why is he humiliated? When he marries somebody to be king of an area,
right?
That's not humility.
Okay, so you're asking it's not true. It's not, well, is that, why is it not humility? Meaning he's a ruler, meaning being a ruler is not intrinsically, being a ruler is not intrinsically not humble. Being humble is saying, you could have rulers who are humble, it's rare, but you can have, the fact that he is doing so for political purposes is not, by definition, not humble, right? Okay, right? So I don't think that by definition is not humble. The question is again, why does the Torah have to say immediately? Their criticism is he marries someone from out of the tribe, and the Torah says, oh, by the way, he's humble. It doesn't seem to connect in any way. It doesn't seem to connect. So if you jump to the Ran. Okay, the Ran says like this. The Bechor Shor. If you look towards the bottom of the page, there's a Bechor Shor. Bechor Shor is Rav Yosef ibn Kaspi. Rav Yosef ibn Kaspi is a not such a well-known commentator. He lives in the 14th century in a place called Provencia. It's a place you will consistently see, just as a sidebar, whenever you find a commentator from that region, I guarantee, if you start reading a little bit of the commentary, you will find out-of-the-box thinking. I don't know what it is about that place, but there is something about the people of Provencia. They never follow like the regular normative rulings or way of looking at things. It's always a little out of the box. Okay, so which I like. It's a little creative. So let's see what he has to say. He says like this: Lefi Pshat, the simple explanation. Shayu Omrim, they were saying, V'chilo matza Isha mibnos Yisrael shikach lo Isha. Their criticism was as follows. The Rav Yosef ibn Kaspi says a little bit different. He does not understand that this is a wife that Moshe married 40 years ago. They understand that right now he is marrying a new wife. Right now he goes ahead and marries a full-fledged Cushite wife. What triggered that? I don't know. I have no idea. But it's the best and simplest read. Because one of the questions which we did not address is, why are they complaining now? Right? That's a question number 7, which I never said out loud, and that is that what is it about what just took place that they're complaining at this moment, this juncture? And according to the Bechor Shor, they're complaining right now because right now Moshe, at 81, goes ahead and says, I want to get married to another woman, and he gets married to a Cushite. So this is not, whereas the Rashbam says this is the wife from 40 years ago, a Cushite wife. According to the Ibn Kaspi, according to the Bechor Shor, it's a new wife. It's a new Cushite wife. You with me? We're so far up to like 3 different approaches. One approach is it's a reference to Tzipora. Approach number 2, it's a reference to a Cushite queen he married way back when. And approach number 3, it's a Cushite. Again, simple read, but it's someone he's marrying right now. And now we can understand why they're complaining right now. You with me? Right? But let's see. So let's see. Now he's going to explain the humility piece. He says like this: what's their concern? What's their critique? V'chilo matza Isha mibnos Yisrael shikach lo Isha. Is there no Jewish women that are fit for Moshe? Shahalach lekachas lo bnos akushim shema relim, that he has to go outside the tribe to marry someone else. In other words, like this. Sometimes people. The criticism is, we have a whole nation over here. There's 3 million men, women, and children. There's like 1 million women, okay? And let's say Moshe wants to have a second wife, which in the ancient world is totally, totally normal. Normal, and all the more so for someone who is a leader. Those are typically the people, someone who is wealthy, someone who's a leader, those are typically the people who ended up having more than one wife, mostly for pragmatic reasons. They were able to afford to support a larger family. Okay, but one way or another, it is normative to marry a second wife. The issue isn't that he marries a second wife. The issue, according to him, is that he marries. Why are you marrying someone from out of the tribe? You know what it must be? He says it must be that you want to be so different. No, you don't want to marry everyone knows who Sarah is, and everyone knows who Miriam, not Miriam, but that's his sister, right? Everyone knows Ahuva, and everyone knows, Samantha. Everyone knows these people. You want to have the mysterious foreigner. You want to have the woman that nobody knows. You want to be different. You're special, right? And that's their critique. Their critique is, what's wrong with you? There's so many good, wonderful prospects among the Jewish people. Why are you running off to go find someone from outside? It must be that it's coming from a place of arrogance. Sometimes people say that they don't want to marry anyone like normal. They want to marry someone exotic, right? Where's that coming from? Okay, there's something exciting about someone exotic, but they're digging a little deeper and they're saying, Moshe, this seems to be coming from a place of arrogance, right? And that's their critique. Their critique is that the only reason you're marrying someone from outside the tribe is because you want to be different. And to that, the Torah responds, Moshe is the most humble of all. That's not why he does so. Why he does so, we don't know. But don't tell me it's because of his arrogance, because God weighs in, right? It doesn't say Moshe says, no, I'm humble. That would be weird. But the Torah says, God says, Moshe is the most humble of all. So don't think that he's doing it for reasons of arrogance, because Moshe is incredibly humble. Okay? So let's review so far. We've covered a little more ground because now we can understand a little bit about the response of the Torah. It says that he's married, according to this approach, it is indeed a woman from the outside, but it's not a wife that he had way back when, because if it was a wife he had way back then, again, we had two questions. One, why do you go ahead and, why is this mentioned over here? Like, why all of a sudden are we talking about this? If he had this wife all along, they should have brought this up, I don't know, day one. The first time they see Moshe again, like, who's this woman? What are you doing, right? Or any time, and maybe after the giving of the Torah. But why over here? It doesn't fit, right? That's one question. Question number two was why the mention of Moshe's humility if it's about this queen he had from years back when? So, again, the Bechor Shor is saying, no, it's a new Cushite wife. He marries her right now, okay? Timing, check. We understand that now. And in terms of the next verse, the humility, we understand that as well. Because we understand that God was stating it wasn't because of his arrogance. Okay, that fits pretty nicely. It doesn't, though, explain the next passage. What's the next passage? The next passage which we read, which talks about the greatness of Moshe's prophecy. Because that doesn't seem to be relevant to this dialogue. Again, we've explained the timing, according to this approach. Moshe just married her. We've explained why the Torah has to say he's very humble, because their critique was that he's arrogant. But then why does God's message should be, by the way, guys, Moshe is very humble. Ad Khan, that's it. Instead, God gives them a whole discourse on Moshe's ability to experience prophecy. We're still missing something. Still a little bit off. Still with me? Yeah? So let's go one step further over here. Two more things. One, we have to think about the passage that takes place immediately before this. Okay, trivia. And you know what passage takes place immediately before this? Okay, that's a hard one. It's a long parsha. Don't worry about it. Okay, listen closely and shul. Okay, so the issue, the approach is like this. Sorry, gonna say?
Why are you keeping so haram?
That's earlier in the parsha. Okay, you get half credits. Okay, so you get a half piece of kugel for on Shabbos. Okay, so the passage immediately before this is Moshe complains to God. I'm overwhelmed by the task of overseeing the Jewish people, and God says, okay, go get 70 other elders and delegate. It's a novel idea for Moshe. Moshe, we know, is not the greatest delegator. But God comes along and says, Moshe gets 70 people, and you're going to share your spirit of prophecy with them. Okay, that's the passage that takes place immediately before. Now, there's more to that passage, which we'll revisit soon. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, we're not going to see this one inside, but they explain like this. They go with the approach, bear with me, they go with the approach that this woman is Tzipora. They go with the Ran says that it's Tzipora, okay? But he comes, what is the timing issue over here? What is the idea of the timing? The idea is like this. The idea is that until this point, there's a concept in Judaism called Osek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. If you are doing one mitzvah, you're exempt from doing another mitzvah. Now, that doesn't mean that, I don't know, I am wearing tzitzis right now, so I'm doing a mitzvah, so I'm just going to sit at home and do nothing all day because I'm doing a mitzvah, I don't have to do other mitzvahs. No. What it means is if that there's an emergency, let's say you are, taking care of, someone died, and you need to take care of their burial, and you're fully engaged in that mitzvah, you don't daven then, because you don't make the deceased wait. It's imperative that we take care of them and make sure that they get the proper respect and all that. Or there is someone who has an absolute need, you work with Hatzalah, and you're helping someone who is ill, and they need your help right now. So you don't say, oh my gosh, it's time for davening. Just take a few deep breaths, I'll be back with you, and I'll go run off and daven and then come back. Absolutely not. And those are extreme examples, but anytime you are doing a mitzvah which is fully immersive, you are exempt from doing other mitzvos. So says Rabbeinu Nissim, he says that until Moshe delegated, Moshe was the busiest man on planet Earth. Imagine leading a group of Jews in and of itself. Now, 3 million Jews. Okay, 3 million Jews who just left Egypt. 3 million Jews who just left Egypt who are walking through a desert. It's crazy what Moshe was doing. Moshe clearly didn't eat, didn't sleep. Moshe's life was crazy, and teaching them Torah at the same time. It was wild. So they said, Moshe, he's clearly too busy to ever be with his wife. There's no way. He has no chance ever being with his wife. It's just impossible, right? How would he ever? He's so busy with, and legitimately osik b'mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to be, husband and wife, to be his husband and wife, but it's also a mitzvah to take care of the Jewish people. And therefore Moshe was legitimately too busy. No one could do this like Moshe. But now that Moshe delegated, now that Moshe has 70 other people who could help him, now they say, Moshe, why are you not together with your wife? What's going on over here? Until this point, their criticism was quiet. There's no criticism. They understood. But now that he gets 70 people helping him, why is Moshe still not connected to his wife? And that's their critique. Yes?
Can we conflate two things? That one of them was when the Sarah said were given, you can't be with your wife 3 days.
Yeah.
There's something about intimacy with the voice of God and compatibility with sexual issues that's usher.
Yes.
Now, this is coming up again here, that Moshe has intimacy with God's voice, who knows when, and therefore he also can't
Excellent.
be with the wife.
Excellent. So this brings us now to finally go to where most people start, and that is Rashi. Because Rashi is going to say something along the lines of what you're saying. The reason I'm mentioning him last is because typically, the way Rashi is taught in schools is you open the Chumash, and then you read the Rashi with it. And sometimes we don't appreciate why he said what he said. What's compelling him? And sometimes it seems so far-fetched. What's compelling him? And now that we've seen all these other approaches, and we recognize there are challenges in these other approaches, they're not explaining everything. Even according to this approach of the Ran, what you said does start to explain it, but he doesn't fully unpack all the questions. Again, the timing, the why is she called a Cushis, right? All these, and the humility, where are all these pieces coming from? Why are all these all these different approaches? There are questions left. But now that we have seen those other approaches, I think we're going to have a much greater appreciation for the simple approach of Rashi, which is very sophisticated, but he writes in a very simple, easy way. So you read it, this reads very nicely, but you don't appreciate how many other approaches he's countering and why he's settling with the approach that he has. Okay, so let's read Rashi, and it's going to be very much along the lines that you're saying. Says Rashi, if you look at the beginning of that second page, says Rashi, Isha Cushis, Magid, why is she called a Cushite? So some said because she's from Cush. Okay, the Ibn Ezra said because she's very dark. Again, why is that important for the narrative? Why is that important? Who cares? Okay, she's dark. Very nice. Let's pause for a second to remind ourselves that I'm looking around this room. I'm telling you right now, if any of us would walk into the desert, okay, when the Jews were walking the desert, and be like, "Hi, I'm your great-great-grandchild," they would laugh at us. They would say, "You look like a ghost. You're not a great-grandchild. I don't know what's wrong with you." Why? Because our great-grandparents looked like Egyptians. They didn't look like Ashkenazim. Okay, I think we're all, I don't know, you all look like Ashkenazim. I don't know if you are. But we look weird. We would look weird to them. How we got this color of skin, we're not going to talk about. But the point is that we do not, this is not a natural, this is not the way Middle Easterners look. When the Torah says that Moshe came to Midian, right, the daughters of Yisro described him as an Egyptian. He looked like an Egyptian.
The way he was dressed.
Maybe because the way he's dressed. But practically speaking, our grandparents didn't come from Poland. They came from the Middle East. Avram was a Middle Easterner. It's the same family as Yishmael. I mean, we should look, Again, things happen over the course of a few thousand years, but I'm telling you now, no one looked like this back in the day. I'm telling you, we would look weird to them. All right, so so the notion of the highlighting the fact that she is dark, there are some modern readers who say, they were racist, they were being racist, they were saying she's dark. That's absurd. I think that's absurd because everyone was dark back then. They lived in the Middle East. It's not like. If it would be weirder if she was white like me. Then they'd be like, oh, that weird white person. Now we're talking. That's weird, right? But everyone was dark back then. So I'm just mentioning this because some want to read, again, we call it anachronistic. We're putting our modern, thinking and try to plug it into the Torah. They were all dark. They were all dark. It wasn't a criticism about her darkness, which again goes back to the question. So why, we haven't seen a good answer yet, why are they highlighting the fact that she is dark? Who cares? Who cares? Yeah.
Well, again, she's from a conquered people from the ancestry of Ham. So we haven't gotten over, can you marry those people?
Good.
Not her color, her origin.
Correct. So if you want to say that their issue is, like the Rashbam says, right, the issue is that they're marrying an outsider, someone that we're not supposed to marry, then that does answer the question. But if you take the approach, like the Ibn Ezra, like the Ran, like Rashi, that there's no mention of a second marriage over here, and therefore we have to assume, since there was no mention of him marrying anyone else explicitly, we therefore are going to assume that we're talking about Zipporah. So then we come back to the question, the only person who addressed why she's described as black, who said it's Zipporah, is the Ibn Ezra, who says, because she was dark. But why is that relevant? So yes, if we take it at face value, we understand. But if we're going to say it's Zipporah now, why do we need to highlight her darkness? So says Rashi, no. Magid shakol modim biyafya. Everyone acknowledges her beauty. Keshem shakol modim b'shacharuso shel Kushi. In as much as everyone agrees that someone from Cush is dark. What does that mean? It's a phrase. It's almost like a way of speaking. In other words, when you wanted to say something is black, you say you want to say something is, bright. You say, what do you say? It's as bright as the sun, right? Because that's something that's very bright. But sometimes you would say, let's pick a larger phrase. In as much as the sun is bright, I'm correct, right? In other words, you can hear that statement. It's a way of speaking. So it was a way of speaking to say, whenever you want to say something which is so strongly so, you would say, in as much as we all know about the blackness of someone from Cush, I also know about her beauty. In other words, it's just a way of saying, in as much as the sun is shining, and as much as the sun rises in the east, right? That's a phrase that people use nowadays. And as much as the sun rises in the east, following statement is true, right? So it's a way of speaking. We say it's like when you want to say something definitive, you say, Cushis. So her beauty is standout. Her beauty is extreme. She was stunning, beautiful, right? And that's what they're saying. They're describing her not as someone who is, from a certain country, but rather saying she is a beautiful person. Okay, why is that relevant? Let's keep on reading. V'tadaber Miriam ve'Aaron. So Miriam and Aaron speak about her. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is this the only place in the Torah where a beautiful woman is referred to as a Cushi? Because other places, it talks about Isha Yafas Toar.
Right. I don't know of any other place.
Huh?
But there it says Anish Chara, but I am black. There it's seen as a negative context, but not it's not a color of skin thing. It's she's black in the fact that she's dirty, right? And she's dirty.
The only character in
Yeah.
Jewish history that was
Beautiful.
unusually beautiful.
Correct. Why this term is chosen, I don't know.
Why this term is chosen here,
It's a good question. I don't have a good answer.
which seems to indicate that she was
Ethiopian.
Ethiopian.
Could be. Although I will tell you just very quickly that
Not to argue with Rashi.
no. But yeah, you're good company. Listen, there are others who say that she is from Cush. Okay, fine. I would just mention parenthetically, although we typically translate Cush as Ethiopia, there is discussion if that is correct. It might be Sudan, but whatever. Conversation for another time. But it's same idea. Okay, so here's Rashi's pshat. Here's Rashi's explanation. What does Miriam and Aaron say? He pascha b'dibur tchila. She spoke first. Okay, lefika chigdima hakasuf. Therefore, the Torah mentions her first. Uminayin. So, and you have to read it between the lines. According to Rashi, you know what their critique was? Their critique wasn't that he married someone. The critique was that he married someone and he was not, kind of like we saw with the Ran, that he was not being intimate with her. Okay, now how does someone know that? That's very private information, right? Very strange. Uminayin haisa yodas Miriam, sheperash Moshe ben Isha. How does Miriam know that Moshe was not intimate with his wife? Rabbi Nassan says like this, Miriam haisa vitzad Tzipora. Miriam was standing next to Tzipora. Miriam, the sister, was standing next to Tzipora, the wife. in the passage immediately before this one. Shenemar leMoshe Eldad umeidad misnabim b'machane. Okay, and there's a whole passage where Moshe is sharing of his spirit of prophecy with these 70 other people, and the Torah goes into some detail. And as that happens, Kevan Sheshama Tzipora, when Tzipora, Moshe's wife, hears that they are experiencing prophecy, Amra, she mutters, and she says, Oy vey, Lineshosein shal elu, to these wives, if these men are now going to be prophets. Why? Because now they're not going to be together as husband and wife. As my husband was abstinent from me. So basically, Tzipora, right in the passage before, Moshe delegates. And now these people not only are leaders, but he gives, so whatever this means, his spirit of prophecy to these other people. And when that happens, Tzipora is there, she sees this, she's watching what happens, she says, oh, I feel so bad for them. They're also not going to be able to be with their husbands just like I'm not. And Miriam's sitting there and she hears this, and she says, oh, that's interesting. And so what does she do? She turns to Aaron, and she discusses this with Aaron, and wants to, and by the way, what is she trying to do? She's trying to help Moshe. Let's bear in mind, which is the next point Rashi makes. I'll just paraphrase it. But what's their? They're not just gossiping. Like, did you hear this? Guess what? They're not. No, she's doing it because she cares about her brother, and she doesn't understand. Judaism is very family centered. It's assumed that a husband and wife are going to have a relationship and be together, both emotionally and physically, etc., etc. And therefore, Miriam is bothered, and she turns to Aaron, and what does she say? Aaron, my brother. What's going on with our brother, Moshe, right? What's going on with our brother, Moshe? And by the way, in this context, you could understand a little bit more, maybe, why her beauty has to be mentioned, because he could say, listen, if Moshe was just, okay, they're all, I don't know how old everyone is at this point, who knows, and Moshe's like, okay, whatever, Moshe's not interested, because the fact that Tzipora is, very, very old, etc., and not attractive. No, but she is Isha Cushis. She is this beautiful, stunning, beautiful woman. Why is Moshe not taking care of his wife? I don't understand the excuse. Right? And that's why they're saying, and now let's read the text. Now we understand the connection between the passage before. In the passage before, every other people start experiencing prophecy. So Rav Nassan, quoted by Rashi, says that Miriam overhears Tzipora saying, oh, I feel bad for them. And now Miriam speaks to Aaron and says, guess what I heard? This is a problem. What's going on? He takes his beautiful wife, and now he's not taking care of her physically. He's not living as husband and wife. And what does the Torah say? The Torah says, we'll come back. And what is ultimately the answer that the Torah gives? The Torah tells us about the level of prophecy that Moshe had. Now, this is where we get back to what you were suggesting before. The level of prophecy tells us that Moshe's level of prophecy is radically different than everyone else. And we actually learn from this passage, I'm going to just summarize what some of the commentators say, that from this passage we see qualitatively Moshe's prophecy is very different than everyone else's in many ways. One, when they received prophecy and it wasn't perfectly clear. They had to figure out, it was almost like a riddle. They had like a message, a vision, and they have to go and try to make sense of it. When God spoke to Moshe, he said, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemar. These are the words, and the words that we have in the Torah are exactly the words that Moshe heard. That's one difference. Fundamental difference number two is that in order for most prophets to experience prophecy, they either had to be sleeping, or it was like this overwhelming physical experience where the Rambam describes it almost like an epileptic fit. It was like, imagine like putting your a metal piece into that electric socket. I wouldn't recommend it. But what's going to happen? You're overwhelmed, right? But Moshe had this incredibly heightened level of spirituality where he was able to just communicate to God directly. He didn't need all those limitations, all those differences, right? And all of that is, and this is exactly what you were saying before. We know when the Torah was given, there's this idea that although Judaism does promote, is not anti, physical intimacy, or it doesn't believe in abstinence as a value. We do not believe that, that we do not believe in this notion of living a monastic life where you don't have a spouse and away from the physical world. We believe that we have to engage in the physical world. And at the same time, there is an exception, and his name is Moshe. Moshe needs to be on call all the time. And for most of us, we need to balance spiritual, physical. That's normal, that's appropriate, that's healthy. We need to do that. Moshe is the one person who was told, you do not do that. You need to be on call all the time. You are not allowed to engage in the physical world in any way. Exception, right? Now, Moshe's brother and sister did not know this. They thought Moshe's a prophet and we're prophets. Why do they not know this? Because Moshe is humble. right? Moshe is the most humble of all, and therefore he never told them, guys, I want to tell you something. Listen to this. We're all prophets. My level of prophecy, different level, okay? I see things with, 4D. You see things, trust me. He doesn't do that. He doesn't shoot the breeze and show off. He just basically goes along like everyone else does and pretends he's like everyone else. They don't understand. They were all prophets, and God says, Moshe's level of prophecy. Yes, you are all prophets. He gives prophecy to Miriam and to Miriam and Aaron, but he tells them your level of prophecy is radically different. Your level of prophecy is Moshe's prophecy is radically different, qualitatively different, and therefore he cannot be with his wife. He has to be totally separate. Yes.
These people are all in their 80s now. We're talking Miriam. They're all getting older.
They are getting older. The Torah describes Moshe and Aaron and Miriam as pretty healthy people, like very physically fit people. It describes, we're not going into all the details, but the Torah describes them as yes. So one could just say, okay, it's old age, which would be a legitimate statement to make about an 80-year-old, 81-year-old. But the Torah describes it right before he dies. Describes him as a person who is in absolute physical strength and physical health.
They lived to 120.
They did live a lot longer.
Days,
At least Moshe and
wasn't so old.
Right. At least we don't know about everyone, but it seems like at least some of them lived much longer and had much healthier constitutions, physical constitution. Okay, so let's just summarize, and I want to just finish with one point. So, cryptic passage, very cryptic passage. What's going on over here? Who is this woman? What are they complaining about? We saw a bunch of different approaches. One approach, or two commentators suggesting that we should read the word Cushit, literally that she is from the lands of Cush. Some suggesting this goes back to an earlier marriage, and they're criticizing him for marrying out of the fold because she's from the Canaanite nations. That doesn't answer, again, all of our questions. We have others who suggest it's a new marriage, okay? It's a new marriage. Their issue is that they see him as being arrogant for trying to marry someone who is not part of the Jewish people. And to that, we learn that, no, he is humble. Again, even in those approaches, we don't understand why the Torah has to emphasize his unique experience of prophecy. And that's why I'm going to put those approaches on the side. I'm not arguing with them, but recognizing that there's something a little lacking in those approaches because it doesn't explain the follow-up, why we have to know about the uniqueness of Moshe's prophecy. We then have other commentators saying, no, it is Tzipporah. Some suggesting that she is called Cushit because she has a very dark complexion. Okay? Keep in mind, everyone had dark complexion back then. Rashi suggests, no, it has to do with her beauty, and she is a standout beauty. That is the idea. That's what's being mentioned over here. And the idea is that Miriam becomes aware of the fact that Moshe is not intimate with his wife. She is bothered by that. She doesn't understand why. The reason she doesn't understand why is because Moshe never explained to others that he had this unique level of prophecy. And therefore God steps in and has to step in and say, let me tell you about the greatness of Moshe. Now what's beautiful about this passage is that, sometimes we think that we're in a setting and we have to tell people all about ourselves so that they know who we are, right? They're not going to know me. They're not going to know about all my accomplishments. They're not going to know how great I am. They're not going to know all the amazing things they have to tell them. And you know what this passage tells us? This passage, some actually read in this passage that Moshe was there, that they're actually telling Moshe, what are you doing? Right? That's actually the simplest read is that Vaydaber b'Moshe, Moshe's standing there as well with them. And Moshe's humility is that he doesn't speak up in that moment. It's not that he in general didn't speak up in that moment, because what's he going to say? I'm an awesome prophet, right? He's stuck. And so Moshe in that moment is quiet. And normally we think when we're quiet, when we're humble, then no one's going to respect us, no one's going to take us seriously. And the Torah says the exact opposite. Keep your mouth quiet. Be humble. Don't push your, agenda out there. Don't push yourself out there. If we stop running after kavod, right, then the Mishnah in Perkei Avos says, if we don't run after kavod, kavod runs after us. Moshe is a prime example. In this moment, he is allowing himself to hear criticism. He's being questioned, and Moshe just keeps his mouth shut. He's able to have the confidence to not speak up. We all know for all of time about the greatness of Moshe in this passage because God speaks up and God says, don't worry, people are going to find out. I'll just finish with a cute story they say about the Kutzker Rebbe, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, this Mishnah in Perkei Avos. It says that if you run away from kavod, then kavod runs after you. So this person came to the Kutzker Rebbe and said, I don't understand. I've been running away from kavod my whole life. I've been running away from honor, from dignity. I'm always running away from it, and I'm never get any honor. So the Kutzker Rebbe said, you know what? He said, maybe you should stop looking over your shoulder to see if it's running after you. In other words, we really have to be humble. We can't be, they call it faux humility, right? It's like, I'm not showing off, but, there's ways of showing off in a way that's showing, the idea is, what we take away from this passage, the greatness of Moshe, the place we learn about the greatness of Moshe is the time that he is most silent, he is most humble. He hears people criticizing him, and he's able, not from a place of being a shmata, not because he doesn't have self-confidence, from a place of strength. He's able to say, I'm not going to speak up. And of course, God speaks up. And for all of time, we know about his greatness, specifically from this passage, from the moment that he was able to bite his tongue. And that's when we learn about Moshe's greatness. Okay.